How does a private four-year university program differ from a public four-year university program? What is the chief difference?
I would argue that one of the main differences is how the university is funded. So a public university is going to be funded with help of the state, which means that the state is subsidizing some of the education. As a result, we see that it's more affordable for the public to access the university. Okay. That's in general one of the biggest differences.
Okay. Let's move now to the student enrollment. What are the main factors that determine the number of students that you enroll, that you allow on campus at your university?
So at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, any student that qualifies for admission will be admitted. In other words, we don't have quotas, we don't say our class needs to be X number or X number. If the student has the eligibility for admission, they will be admitted. The Board of Regents, which is the board that governs the university, decides what are the requirements for admissions, what are the things that every student will have to have in order to be admissible to the university. In our case, this is a group of classes that they need to take in high school, and they also need to have an ACT score or SAT score, or be in the top 50% of their class. So we talk about the 16 core classes in high school, which is, I'm going to name them to you so we all are on the same page. 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 3 years of natural science, 3 years of social science, 2 years of a foreign language in the same foreign language, and 1 year of an extra elective. By the way, I recommend that extra elective is math. So 4 years of math is really what we want to see. 16 core classes, plus ACT or SAT score, or to be in the top 50% of their class. If the student has the requirements for admission, they will be admitted to UNO.
So you do not have an ACT score limit, like this 23, 21, 18, 26, you don't, right?
We do. The requirement per the Board of Regents for assured admission, so without any questions, without anybody else looking at any file, will be at 20. So if a student has the 16 core classes and the 20, they are admissible. If the student has the 16 core classes and top 50% of the class, regardless of the score, they're also admissible. What happens if the student has the 16 core classes and maybe not in the top 50% of the class or not at 20? A committee will review that application and then we'll make a decision based on what we see in the transcript, based on what we see on the rigor of the classes that they took, based on all kinds of different criteria. Yeah. Because if I have 100 students that meet the criteria, 100 students will be admissible. The reason why students are denied is because they are, more often than not, deficient in the core classes. So if a student did not take geometry in high school and they're deficient in algebra as well, we know that if a student is deficient in math, that makes it very hard for them to be successful at UNO. So what we're looking at is more on the other side. Are students going to be successful at the university level?
While doing this series, I've come to understand that high school, actually, the GPA and the rigor of classes that you've taken during high school, it's very important. Some universities have moved away from the tradition of asking for ACT and SAT. What is the UNO's policy on that?
So as I mentioned, we are looking at both the ACT score and the high school rank. So we know, as you mentioned, that of course GPA is an important predictor of how students are going to do in college, which is the high school rank. So if a student is in the top 50% of their class, regardless of the ACT, they're going to be admissible. We are using the score as one of the data points, but it is not the tell-all or is not the defining factor. Because Nebraska is now an ACT state, we also know that all students are taking the ACT in order to graduate. So we want to see that score. So in order to submit an application at UNO, a student needs to go to our website, unomaha.edu, and fill out the form. That is the first step in the process. For high school students especially, and for transfer students and maybe some adult students that might be watching this, all of this is done online. We don't have paper applications. So all students go to an online application, fill out the form. The form is a very generic form that is going to ask demographic data, name, address, emergency contact information. It's going to ask about a history of education, whether the student has taken classes in a different institution and is going to transfer those classes. For high school students, if they've taken any dual enrollment classes. Also what classes they're taking in high school. Again, we want to get to that 16 core classes that I mentioned before. The students are telling us this information. So they're telling us in 9th grade I took these classes, in 10th grade I took these classes, 11th grade I took these classes, 12th grade I took these classes. We also ask the student to tell us, self-report, their ACT score, composite and also by section. So the total ACT score and then how much did you score in each section. We ask questions about, in order to discern, are you an international student or not? So if you happen to be here on an F1 visa, we want to know that at that point of application. If you're going to be seeking an F1 visa, we want to see that at the point of application. And that's pretty much the application, right? Which we have then at that point, we have all the data points. So it's not an open enrollment because we are not, you cannot come in and say, I want to register for classes here, right? Okay. The process of enrollment is that a student needs to submit an application. Ideally, the timeline is that we want them to submit an application. If it was up to me, I would have all high school students submit the application in October before the next August. August is when you want to come to admission at UNO. In October, you submit the application. You're going to hear about admission within 24 hours if you have all the requirements. That way you can concentrate in looking for scholarship and we can concentrate in other kind of conversations about whether the university is the right fit for them. Okay. But the application should come out based in about October.
Okay. Do you have differentiation in tuition with regard to location of the student? I mean, in-state tuition versus out-of-state tuition?
That is exactly the form that we use, the pattern that we use, in-state and out-of-state. Out-of-state, again, because it's not subsidized by the state, will pay a higher tuition rate than the in-state students. And if you think about this, when we, going back to our original question, public versus private, it costs the same to provide the education. One student is subsidized by the state, the other one isn't.
And if we have the numbers, and if you don't mind sharing them with us, what is a regular in-state tuition and what is a regular out-of-state tuition?
So when I'm just looking at tuition, just comparing, tuition, yeah. Tuition and fees is what I'm comparing. It's about $7,000 for in-state, about $21,000 for out-of-state.
And that is just for the education, for the classes you're taking. That $7,000 does not include dormitories and just the education you receive.
And I like that you're asking that question because I think that when we are considering different universities, talking the same language, comparing apples to apples is very important. So really understanding the figures, I would like to compare. If anybody's watching this, they should look at how much am I going to pay out of pocket for everything, right? So universities, we often talk about the cost of attendance. The financial aid packet is going to be created based on the cost of attendance that looks at all the other criteria. For in-state students, we go from $19,000 cost of attendance, out-of-state students, $32,000 cost of attendance.
Okay. Does make sense now. $7,000 is just the tuition for the classes, for education part of your attendance, but attendance means other stuff that parents and families should consider before deciding. Okay. Do you have a quota for international student enrollment?
No, we don't.
You don't?
No, we don't. So it's a similar situation in that if the student has the qualifications to come into the university, they will be admitted to the university.
Okay, let's say I live, I don't know, where I'm from in Albania. I would like to apply to University of Nebraska at Omaha as an undergraduate student. What should I do and when should I start my application process?
I would say as soon as possible. part of the variables that we have with international students is that we have the time to request the visa appointment, etc. So if I were in charge of the world and I had a magic wand once again, I would say start about a year ahead. If you're thinking about coming in August, thinking about applying in October is an ideal timeline. The reality is I see that a lot of international students are probably starting to apply in January to come in August, which is fine. We still have time. Things get tricky once we get to closer to summer. If you're applying in summer to come in August, we are in a time crunch and we may not be able to get you in the country with the right timeline. So yeah.
So you say at least October if you want to enroll the August of the following year. Are the requirements the same as they are for regular students, domestic students?
The requirements are the same in that we look at the classes in high school, and we look if the student has taken the ACT or the SAT. That is one way that we can review English proficiency. That's one of the things that is in addition for international students. We're measuring English proficiency. So more often than not, we're going to ask for the TOEFL, the test of English as a foreign language.
Why do you say more often than not? If the ACT is sufficient, you say it's
because most people abroad don't take the ACT.
Okay.
ACT and SAT are tests that you take usually in the U.S. When you're abroad, you're most likely to take the test of English as a foreign language.
As a foreign language. Is there a limit there? I know that there are numbers there with the TOEFL. What is your proficiency? What do you allow in university?
In general, 61 for the computer-based and 500 for the paper-based. The reason why I go in general is because there are some majors that will require higher scores.
All right. And undergraduate students, what is the biggest number of students enrolled at your university? Undergraduate or graduate? I mean international students.
Oh, international students?
Yeah.
That is a good question. So I don't know about the answer for international students. We have a total of 15,000 students on our campus, and about 13,000 of them are going to be undergraduate students. So, proportionally, I don't know if I have a bigger representation at the graduate level or undergraduate.
Okay, and we talked about the deadline, and I would like, as a parent, I'm sending my kid to the United States. Can you please walk me through the process of that package that my kid is sending to you? What happens to that package?
Okay, so the first step is to submit the application online. And also to submit any additional documentation. For international students, we want to see the transcripts translated into English. And again, it's all transcripts from high school equivalent, right? If the student has taken any college credit, we want to see those transcripts also translated into English. For international students, there are, for the generation of the I-20, which is the documentation that they need in order to ask for a visa, we need the financial affidavit, which is a statement that students are going to be able to afford the tuition once they come to the university. Let me just go through all of that. TOEFL score, thank you. I knew I was missing one more thing. The TOEFL score, and then once we have all those documents in our office, we're going to be able to evaluate all the requirements and send hopefully the student a yes, congratulations, you've been admitted. Then the student can request the I-20 to be sent to them. So physically, we put the form in the mail, they get it. At that point, they're making appointments to go to the embassy and request the visa. They go to a visa appointment. Depending on how that goes, then hopefully it's all going to go well. They're going to be granted the visa. Then they can start making their plans to come to the United States.
To the United States. You mentioned tuition affidavit. What is the tuition for an international student?
It's the out-of-state rate.
The out-of-state rate. Do they have to deposit the whole? How does it help me as a parent? Do I have to have the whole 19,000, 31,000 deposited before?
You don't need to deposit it, but you need to show that you are going to be able to pay it. More often than not, international students then show bank statements to show that they're going to be able to pay it. So an international student needs to show that they're going to be able to pay that first year.
Okay. And then after the first year, are they eligible for any scholarships, international students, or it's limited?
And students are eligible for scholarships, even as they are applying in the process, but there are limited funds. Okay. My recommendation is to never give up and always continue looking for scholarships. I think that there is more opportunities for scholarships once you are a student at UNO, through your programs of study and all kinds of things. But even before, there are some opportunities for scholarships. There's something that we call the General Scholarship Application that is available to all students. Once you're an admitted student, usually, if I go with my ideal timeline, November 1st, it's when the General Scholarship Application will be available for admitted students, and then you can fill out that form, and it's a database of a lot of scholarships that we have on our campus that could be available for all students, for any student.
I apply, you say yes, you're admitted if you would like to. Should the student decide on enrollment before applying for scholarship, or just admission is enough?
So this is the way I see it. A student should receive admissions from multiple places, so they have doors open. They're really not going to be forced to walk through the door, accept an admission until much later in the process. In our process, May 1st is our deadline for our deposit. That's when the student is making the commitment, I'm coming to UNO. But applying for scholarships to kind of fill out your bucket and see where am I going to fit in is part of the game, part of the process of seeing what opportunities am I going to have at the university. Okay,
so you don't really need to make your choice, but you can still apply for scholarships. All right. Now back to the student, to the international student. Let's say everything it worked fine. The student is coming to the United States. If there is a mistake that you have seen students making the most, can you share that with us, if there is any? Once an international student comes to the United States, what do you think that they need to do that they're not doing? And it's okay if there is nothing.
I would not call it a mistake. I guess I would call it more, this is a pattern that I see with international students, right? It's not something that they're doing wrong or right. We all have a sense of urgency. So they tend to send my email saying, urgent! So now I hear that everything is urgent, when there are things that are not necessarily urgent, right? Of course, from the student side, of course I want to answer today. So to me, this is my urgency. But if every email that you write says urgency, then we lose the meaning of urgency, right? So in my advice is, let's be patient. If we do things with enough time, we're going to be fine, right? If we do wait until the last minute and try to rush through things, it gets very tough for both of us. You may not get your I-20 on time, your embassy appointment is stressful, then when do you buy the tickets and when do you enroll in classes? All of that, all those processes are delayed, and it makes it hard for all of us involved in the process.
Okay. And I would like to ask you one more question. When the students arrive here, what is the first thing that they need to do in terms of documents? I'm not talking about academic enrollment, but in terms of being within the status, maintaining status, what is the first thing they need to do? So
one of the things that we're going to be able to do for our students that are coming is that one of the first events that they attend is orientation. And that's when they give them the explanation of, okay, this is how you maintain your status, this is how you don't get out of status, where you can work, where you cannot work, this is how you get a social security number, etc. So all of that is part of the orientation process, and that is usually done within the first week. So as long as international students are reading the documents that we send them and the emails that we send them and show up to the events that we tell them to show up, they're going to be fine.
a first-year student, are they allowed to live off campus?
They are?
So at UNO, that's one of the things that makes us unique. Students are not required to live on campus. It's an option. Now for international students, I think that's a little bit different, because that's a way for them to for us to provide community for international students.
So they're limited on campus. They need to live on campus. All right. And I thank you very much.
No problem.